Welcome to Pop Politics and Culture. You got your host, Diamond Studded, in the building, and we got Robert Wallace all the way from Gays Against Groomers, the Arizona chapter. And we're going to talk about what transgenderism is and what the indoctrination of children is and what the organization Gays Against Groomers stands for and how they started. So, Robert, can you give us some background about your organization, please?
Yeah, thanks, Diamond. I appreciate your time. So, Gays Against Groomers is a coalition of LGBT and some T people who are fighting against the indoctrination, sexualization, and mutilation of children being done in the name of LGBTQIA LMNOP inclusiveness. And so, because there's so many people within our community who are trying to help these youth so they think live their truth, which are what they're really doing is sowing crazy ideas into otherwise healthy minds, and they're doing this in the name of the gays. It's necessary for the people within our community who realize they've gone over the line, that it actually has nothing to do with helping people. At the end of the day, it's hurting people, I should say. And so we are speaking out against that, saying, don't do this in our name. Don't hijack our community in order to justify this insanity.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, when we're talking about hijacking our community and doing this in the name, we want to talk about doing things like hormone replacement therapy, puberty blockers for children, because most people don't understand puberty is just more than your coming of age when it comes to sex, whether it's women menstruating, developing breasts, the guys developing the deep voice, the facial hair, and starting to ejaculate. It's a lot deeper than that. It's the development of the mind, the development of the brain, and how you can cognitively process things and stepping into being an adult. So when you're blocking puberty, you're not only blocking the parts of your body that you don't want on display, you're blocking the growth of your mind. So it's like if I put my child on puberty blockers at age 11 and they turn 25, I'm going to be cognitively speaking to an 11-year-old because they haven't had the opportunity to have the proper hormones to process their brains and their thought process. So what do you think about the bathroom thing? Like, what do you think about the all inclusiveness in the bathroom and allowing men to play women's sports? Like, how does that make you feel?
Well, I actually was speaking in support of Senator Kavanaugh's bill, SB 1040, recently, and it is actually a bathroom bill. And I was just contacted by a mother in Tucson because they need some support down there at the school board meeting because they're also having some bathroom issues where we've got boys going into girls' bathrooms, and this is all being done because, hey, today I self-identify as whatever. So it's not only inappropriate, but the more specifically on a moment-to-moment basis, you're putting people within this weird situation where now they're with a guy right next to them, or now you could have girls in the guy's bathroom, and it's an uncomfortable thing. I think it stirs up feelings that are naturally there because we know that that doesn't feel right, that doesn't seem right. And obviously that goes without talking about any of the potential rapes or sexual abuses that could happen in those situations when certain predator type people decide to take advantage of those situations.
So when we talk about predator type situations like rape, let's get into Loudoun County, Virginia, where there is actually on record there was a guy that identified as a trans woman, a high school student. He raped a woman at his school. The superintendent actually took him out of the school, put him in another school, didn't let the school know about what was going on. He gets into the second school, he rapes another female in the bathroom. And this female that he raped at the second school, her father actually turned all the way up to the max. He came up to the school, fought at the school board. He was actually arrested. His charges just got vacated last year, so he had pending charges for over 2 years for defending his daughter. At the school now, they no longer allow this particular child to identify as trans, and he has been arrested and placed on the sex offenders list. So we're not saying that all trans people are sexual predators. That's not what we're saying. We are saying that with these this open, relaxed laws and rules, you have room for for people to penetrate the system under the guise of being transgender so that they can commit atrocities against women. There's instances in California where they are opening up the jail system to allow those that identify as trans women to enter women's prisons. There was recently on the news, we can pull these articles up, so we'll put the links at the bottom so you can watch, where there was a man that was put into a women's prison because he identified as a woman, and he actually raped the female prisoners, and two of them ended up pregnant actually in jail from being raped by a trans identifying human. What I noticed about trans men don't end up in the men's prison. Trans men don't do a lot of the overly overt behaviors when it comes to proclamations of their gender identity. They're not like Dylan Mulvaney going out throwing tampons and passing tampons against the women. So it's not even the trans men. It's primarily those that identify as trans women that are primarily trying to indoctrinate children. So, Robert, can you tell us how long you've been with Gays Against Groomers and what being a part of this organization means to you?
Yeah, so I'm the Arizona lead now. Our organization is only, I think, 8, 9 months old, actually, and we've blown up since we've come out because there's just been such a need for it. You know how they say necessity is the mother of invention? Well, there was a necessity for our organization, for the LGBT people to come out and stand out. So, and I've been with them for a few months now, and so as a lead of Arizona, which we have leads in every state, I'm seeing so much need and outcry, appreciation for what we're doing, and then people calling and saying, hey, we need your help and support. And it's really shocked me at the beginning to be hearing all these parents saying, thank you for what you're doing. It makes a big difference. Like, I really appreciate it. It's very necessary. And it just brings me to tears at some point because on one hand, day to day, I'm asking myself, am I really doing this? Is this really happening? Is this really necessary? Like, I can't believe we're talking about this. Like, are we making something out of nothing? And then I just keep seeing more and more evidence constantly pouring in that shows, like, not only is it something, but there are legislators who are actively and passionately trying to push laws which are changing the landscape of things, where this sort of stuff, it's being normalized. We're going into this new sort of twilight zone situation where not only is it happening, but all the problems that are coming with it, unfortunately, mean that we got to find new solutions for this sort of thing. So for our organization, it's blowing up right now. And with that said, if anybody, whether you're in Arizona or you're in any other state in the country or the world, we have a European, chapter. We have a Japan chapter. There's a place for you if you want to join. If you're in the LGBT community and you don't think this is right, stand up and say something, because your tacit agreement, your silence is.
Yeah, silence is everything. Like, if you see something, say something. And, when you think about being a parent, if you have a parent, nieces or nephews, your child should never feel uncomfortable at school. So we're not saying that the trans children should feel uncomfortable by any means. What we're saying is there needs to be more solutions to the problem. So if you have a men's restroom and a women's restroom, there should be a gender inclusive restroom, so the biological men and the biological women won't feel uncomfortable in their safe space. And we also want the trans identifying children to have a safe space so they feel comfortable as well. Because on the flip side, the guy that identifies as a trans, when he becomes a trans woman and he's using the restroom with biological girls, girls are mean. We're already mean to each other. We tell you we don't like you, you ugly, you stink. Like, girls are bitches. So just only imagine what they're going to do and say when someone is invading their space and making them feel uncomfortable. And when you think about the trans men that start to integrate into the men's restroom, what I've heard in a lot of instances, that the biological men, they're so alpha, they're going to prove to you that you're still a girl. So I've heard instances of trans men being attacked by biological men because they still have their female genitalia. And so with these, super aggressive men, they're like, at the end of the day, you're still a woman. And some trans men have been victims of rape by biological men because these men wanted to exude their masculinity and show them that they're still women, essentially. So when it comes down to safe spaces for everybody. It's not a safe space for anybody, whether you're gay, bi, lesbian, transgender, heterosexual. It's not a safe space to put men and women in the same bathroom at the same time unless it's a single stall. Like when you're at home and you need to use the bathroom, it's one toilet in there, one shower, one sink. When you get done, the next person goes in. So to ensure the safety of all people, if we're going to continue with promoting gender neutrality, we need to have facilities that accommodate all genders, not just men and not just women, because although the trans people feel uncomfortable by not being able to use the bathroom of their identification, the heterosexual people also have an uncomfortability also. And at some point, we need to make everybody comfortable. It's not about, well, let's make the whole group of people uncomfortable for a handful, because by population, the trans population only takes up about 2% of our population. So we're making all of these rules for 2% of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm all for creating a safe space for transgender people. Fine, I get that. Less than 1% used to identify as transgender. Now we have some around 7% are identifying somewhere in the spectrum of the LGBTQIA spectrum, which, if you don't know what all that means, that's a lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, and some of these have two Qs: QQ for queer and questioning, I for intersex, A for asexual, another A for allies. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. It's everybody except, straight people, basically. But I get that, like you want to feel safe, but you don't want to impose a solution, that's designed for a couple percentage of people and then impose that on everybody else. That's not fair.
One of my favorite trans women is actually Caitlyn Jenner. And the reason why I admire Caitlyn Jenner, because when Caitlyn identified as Bruce, won a decathlon, was like one of the best world athletes. And Caitlyn has spoken out about how being a biological man participating in women's sports is a disadvantage to women because men have bigger hearts, so they have bigger hearts, bigger lungs, they produce more red blood cells, so when they're running, the oxygenation and everything is completely different. They're stronger, they're faster, their bodies are completely built different. So when they say a male dominant sport or a women's dominant sports, it's the body. It's not the fact that I identify as a woman now and I'm living my life as a woman. I still have the genetic makeup and the buildup of a man. So although the trans woman may have had hormone replacement therapy or has been on estrogen and has higher estrogen levels and testosterone levels, it doesn't take away your lung capacity, it doesn't take away your heart capacity, it doesn't take away your wingspan, like the legs on, like when we're sprinting and running, like a person that's 6'6" is definitely going to beat me in a race. I'm only 5'4" because they can take bigger strides and bigger steps. So it's just all simple biology, and we do understand that people should be included. But if we look at the WNBA, the Minnesota Lynx, I believe, actually has a gender neutral player that has had a double mastectomy and plays WNBA women's basketball, and the individual identifies as a man, but they're not in the NBA. So when they make these assertments of trans women should play women's sports, why aren't they pushing as hard for the trans men to integrate into men's sports? Because a biological woman cannot compete with LeBron. It's just like LeBron versus Brittany Griner. You put LeBron and Brittany Griner on the court doing a one-on-one. Brittany Griner is one of the best female basketball players in the WNBA. She's broken records. She's won championships. But Brittany Griner is not beating LeBron James in a one-on-one. It's not going to happen. Right. Like, she might give him a run for his money. She might get some shots off on him. But, like, if LeBron dunks on Brittany and comes body-to-body contact, like, she's hitting the ground.
Yeah, and I think this is where things are getting so carried away. It's like we go from the women's liberation movement and we can do it, and yeah, women can do anything. Women are great. I love my mother. I love all my female friends. That goes without saying. But we do have to acknowledge that there are unignorable biological differences between men and women. And if we want to just theorize and talk all abstractly about how we're all equal in every single way and ignore all these differences, then, we're not acknowledging that we are putting people at a disadvantage, that you are ruining all of women's sports for women, and you're becoming completely oblivious. The argument could be said like, oh, there's big, strong women who are, stronger than some of the weakest men, and there's all this overlap and everything. But, we are on different playing fields for a reason. And so, I used to be in wrestling, and I was on a varsity team, and I had to wrestle against a couple girls on a couple occasions, and they beat me. Well, one of them beat me twice because I had to wrestle her twice, and I wasn't that great of a wrestler, and then the other girl, actually, I can't remember what happened. Oh, yeah, she beat me too. Like I said, I wasn't that strong. So, there are occasions where, if you are like measured and all this and that stuff, they could actually compete against each other. But in, the vast majority, if you average out, where men stand and what women are producing, they have to be, it's like weight classes even, you're going to be on different levels, and age groups, and certain other, fields and sports, you don't want to put the pee-wee football players with the varsity football players, it's like acknowledging where their general strengths are and average and keeping the playing field even. And when you're, generally adding women to men's sports, there's going to be a disadvantage, and especially for those when you enter a man into the female arena, then it's just not fair for all these women who spent their whole life trying to compete.
Totally, and it's a lot of trans pretenders out here. And a trans pretender is a person who identifies as trans when they're not, in order to take advantage of the benefits that's out there for the LGBT community, particularly the transes. So you have some coaches, I've been watching videos and seeing how you've had high school sports coaches that have picked some of their male basketball players and put them on the women's team and said, hey, this person is trans so they can win the championship. But the guy has a girlfriend and is living his best straight male life. But when it's time to play basketball, puts his hair in a ponytail and gets on the court and identifies as trans during basketball time. And that's not fair. That's wrong. It's an egregious practice. And now that they have so much flexibility, people are pushing the limits. And when people push the limits and there's nobody to push back, then there's nobody to protect the innocent. And it's about the kids. Like, I like what the message your shirt says, like, let kids be kids.
Yeah.
As a child, yeah, we probably all thought we was gay when we were younger, like, because we wanted to play with the boy toys and the basketballs and everything like that. But for me personally, it was never to the point where I felt like I was born in the wrong body, and nobody ever tried to tell me, well, since you don't feel like you should have breasts, you're a man. Because I was one of the lesbians that was like, oh my God, I don't want to have breasts, I don't need boobs, because in my mind this is what a stud was supposed to look like, this is how I was supposed to carry myself. And I can only imagine if in today's time, if I was having those issues and I told my therapist, like, I don't like my boobs, the first thing they would be trying to do is give me hormones and put me on HRT, instead of seeing, do I suffer something like body dysmorphic disorder, where that basically is people who are not comfortable with their body, whether it's I don't feel like my booty is big enough so I get a BBL, or I don't like my nose and get a nose job, or I get breast enhancements. It's all body dysmorphic disorder, and they're mixing body dysmorphic disorder with transgenderism because there is a huge market for money when it comes to that. Now, there are transgender people, and the people that are truly transgender and have made that transition and made that next step, like, we applaud y'all, we salute you, because it's major to live your life as a male or a female and then wake up and decide that you want to transition. And the social integration, the emotional integration, like everything that they go through, we're not taking that away from them, because there are people who are truly trans, but there are people that are trying to take advantage of the trans people and make all of these rules because they want to shake things up and they want to do egregious practices and behaviors here.
Yeah, and, we got the sticker here, actually. I have, no child is born in the wrong body. This is one of the things that, we put on shirts and stuff. And, the reason why, or save the tomboys, yeah, it's okay to be a girl who's kind of like masculine, you don't have to be, and it's like you were saying, I grew up gay, and if I would have grown up in the world the way it is right now, with all of these options, not just was I an attention seeker on so many levels, like I would have been like, oh, well, yeah, I'm a girl, girl, and does that, everything that they really do glorify going in that direction, to a point where a child who would think that they are a superhero or a dinosaur or this, that, and the other, now they're being encouraged down lines of reasoning that makes them feel like, oh, I'm special, or I'm doing something. And actually, while it's not true with everybody, there's a lot of people who are going down this route because it's popular, because it seems like, it's the valid thing to do. They're being validated. But on the other hand, when they come out of this and they start to wake up and they start to actually hit sexual maturation, they get through puberty, or their brain starts to develop around the age of 25, then you've got people who are like, what did I do? It's like, oh man, like, I want to carry on with life, and this whole,
And a lot of those things are irreversible. Like, once you start puberty blockers and once you get your hormones replaced, unless you had your eggs harvested or unless you had your sperm frozen, you cannot have a biological child of your own. As a woman, once you have a hysterectomy, that means you're taking out your uterus, meaning you cannot carry your baby anymore. So unless you had some of your eggs frozen as well, then you'd never be able to essentially have a biological child. So it's a lot that goes with this, besides I don't feel comfortable in my body, because guess what, I didn't feel comfortable in my body for a long time, but the God that I serve is so good that he allowed me to finally find peace and comfort and enjoy who I was, and realize that I did not have to look like a boy if I wanted to be a lesbian, and that being a lesbian meant women that like women. So obviously I had to have something that resonated with being a woman in order to get women. Like, I can't, I can only imagine like how maybe trans women feel, because they identify as a woman and it's a guy that they have a crush on, and the dude says like, well, I want to have a baby with my woman. Like, it's certain stuff that you want to do with the woman that you cannot do with the trans woman. Like, you can love their personality, but the vaginal sex isn't even the same, because they had a vaginoplasty, and with the vaginoplasty they give you a dilator. So the dilator determines the size of your vagina that you built, and a lot of times it don't work. Like, I've seen so many videos about how they've lost depth. It's tightened up. I've saw videos where some of them's holes have closed up, because like your body automatically closes wounds. Like, if I cut my arm right now, my body is going to automatically start to scab up to try to close it up. So when you think about putting a hole somewhere where it essentially didn't belong, like the horror stories from these surgeries. Now, you have some people who have had very successful surgeries and have been able to live their best life, but there's a lot of people who haven't had successful surgeries. They say 66% of people who have gender reassignment surgeries is a botched surgery and it fails.
Yeah, and just to be clear, and I think you sort of were earlier, that this is not about a battle against trans people. This is not about a transphobia or having a prejudice towards anybody. But when you're dealing with children, it's a whole different ball game. When you start to rear them in the direction of irreversible sort of surgeries, whether it's like snip snip or whether you're injecting them and messing with their whole system. So it's different than when you're an adult and you decide to make these sorts of decisions, whether it's a drag queen thing. It's like, oh, okay, you want to go to adult performances, you want to be involved with that. Well, you're an adult.
So if you could take a child to a drag show, then that means I could take my child to the strip club. Right. So if I can take a child to a drag show where they're in scantily clad clothes doing what we see in these drag shows, that means technically it's okay for me to pick up my child and take him to Jaguar's Gold Club.
Yeah, and tonight in Florence, actually, there's an all-ages drag show that's happening, and that's something that, we're standing against. I mean, really, if you've watched RuPaul's Drag Race or you've gone to drag shows, you know that the persona and the characterization of their behavior, I would just call it, they're behaving like nasty hoes. You're on the stage to gyrate, to rub your clitoris, to do all this sexual stuff. And even though you might be dressed like, really campy and really clowny, so it's not really like sexually attractive, it's not like in that same way, it's sexually inappropriate, Totally. And so no matter any way you slice it, now when you're talking about, drag queen story hour, like it's not a big deal, but.
Totally. So, Robert, can you tell us where we can find your organization at on social media, how we can follow you, how we can be a part, and how people can make donations to further the cause?
Yeah, so you go to gaysagainstgroomers.com. There you can just click the Join tab. You can see the open positions. You can, become a member. You can donate there, and you can contact me through there if, depending on the state you're in, and we will get you brought up to speed, and you can participate with us and making a difference.
And how can we find the Arizona chapter?
The Arizona chapter, just go into chapters, and then we're the very first state. Click it, and then you'll have our Twitter. You'll have an email directly to me. And
Thank you so much, Robert, for coming out here representing Gays Against Groomers and Gays Against Groomers Arizona and providing an enlightenment perspective on what it is to groom a child and to put a child in an awkward position. This is Pop Politics and Culture, Diamond Studded, and Robert Wallace, and we're out.